All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is lights within Unity. So lights are an essential part of our Unity projects, and we're going to talk about the three main different types of lights and how to use them in a basic way. There's a massive lighting window and things like baked lighting that we're not going to get into in this class just because we simply don't have enough time. But we are going to cover how to basically use lights. So every scene comes with a directional light built into it. You might notice the directional light over here in the hierarchy or just in your scene. And the directional light, if I hit F to frame on it, has no physical properties. For instance, if I move it around, nothing actually changes in the scene. In the scene, it kind of is just an indicator of the direction the light is coming from. So right here we have the little sun icon, and then we have these beams coming out of it. And in fact, if I look up at the skybox, I can see a sun in my scene indicating where that light's coming from. Notice the shadows hit as if the sun's from that perspective as well. If I tap E to switch to rotation mode, now we're going to see how the directional light can shift and change. As I move this sun around, it's going to move it closer and further from the horizon. And in Unity 5, they've added this procedural skybox where basically as we get close to the horizon, it starts to shift colors. There's sort of an atmosphere simulation. So really like a full, almost like day-night cycle that you can create in your games. So as I rotate this around in different directions, I'm going to have different lighting effects. Right, so I'm going to go for something kind of moody and dark. You'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner, as you change lights, it's doing a kind of real-time bake is what it's called, but basically it's having to recalculate some of the things in your scene. So we can change the color of the light over here, make it more red, make it more green. I'm going to kind of stick with a yellow, more natural light. We can choose the intensity, right, how bright it is. The indirect multiplier is going to change. A number of things, but we're actually not really going to see the effect too much here. The shadow type, do we want hard shadows? You can see the hard lines right here. Or soft shadows. Do we want basically how strong are the shadows? There's a few different biases we can play with how the shadows fall. Turn the intensity down a little bit there. A cookie, which is kind of like almost like a texture, but for a shadow. It's sort of a cutout. A halo, we can have that draw. We can have a flare for actual lens flares, and a few other things that we can play around with. So that's the directional light. The physical location of it means nothing, but the rotation is really what we're caring about. Now, usually you'll always have one directional light in every scene, just because that's kind of the traditional setup. We have other lights, though. Let's hit Create and go down to Light and choose a point light. A point light, as you can see from the icon, is a light bulb that projects its light out into a spherical shape. So as I move this light around, you're going to see it's brighter the closer to the center of the sphere, and if the sphere isn't touching it, then it's not lit at all. So we can get things progressively brighter or darker as we move them around. Has very similar settings. It's got a range setting that as we change, that sphere will grow and shrink. Has an intensity setting, color, etc. If you want it to cast shadows or not, I'd recommend having most of your lights cast shadows. Next we have a spotlight. And a spotlight is more of a point light mixed with a directional light. So we can direct it onto specific surfaces. It's really good for casting broad shadows. We can grab parts of the cone down here and extend them. We can extend the range, make it larger or smaller. We can rotate the base model itself, point it at different things. change its intensity, just like the other lights. It's better as kind of an accent light. So you can use any number of these lights, but there is a bit of a computational restriction on how many can be associated with a single object. That really just depends on the platform that you're using. But just play around with lights and you'll see how they work. It's a pretty self-explanatory system, but can generate some really cool results if you play with this stuff enough.